Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey David, how are you doing today?
It is a gorgeous day out there. I was visited my mom in the seniors home and wheeled her
hmm
around the neighborhood.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's great to be able to get out and about with them. It sure picks up their spirits to get outside. Especially my parents lived a lot of their lives outside. They love nature, so that was couldn't do that for a long time, Bruce, because the rules. So finally, things have changed, and tomorrow's a big day in Alberta. This
hmm
podcast may run after that, but
Right.
tomorrow's June 10th, and a huge moment in reopening the province. So I'm excited about that too. Be nice to go to a restaurant and sit with hope. Pretty much the vast majority of us are vaccinated with one dose. Some have two, like you.
Two for me.
Two for you.
Yeah.
So things are looking up. How are you doing?
Friday is my 2 weeks from my second dose, so
Oh,
that's
sweet.
that's the all clear kind of date that they've said, assuming the thing is effective for me, and I've got no signs that it isn't. So, I mean, there's no 100% guarantee for anyone, I don't suppose, with the vaccine, but it's in the high 90s. I like my chances.
No guarantees in life, period,
Oh, well,
except
that's true.
except death and taxes. So
hmm
COVID's in one of those categories. Uh, but fortunately, not coming for us, hopefully. Alrighty, Bruce. Today we're going to talk about, we're going to do a keep, hold, or fold on three different D-men all at once.
Okay.
And they all have something in common. They're all left shot D-men. All of them, uh, well, we could even include Chris Russell. We could bump it up to four.
hmm
But all of them were kind of in competition for playoff spots, playoff ice time. We're talking about Caleb Jones, Slater Kuekkoek, and Dmitry Kulikov. Kulikov is a UFA. Jones
Yeah.
is signed for one more year. And Slater Kuekkoek is a UFA, I believe. Or is he RFA? I
Yes.
think he's UFA.
UFA.
So the Oilers have some decisions to make here. Why don't we start with Kulikov? I always feel like calling him Vladimir Kulikov for some
hmm
reason. He is Dmitry.
Dmitry.
Dmitry Kulikov. He, I believe, is what, 30, 31. He's quite a veteran NHL D man. We saw him in the regular season for about 10 games, in the playoffs for three until he got benched in favor of Chris Russell. That might have happened earlier if Chris Russell's health had been better earlier in the playoffs. Bruce,
He is
Dmitry
30,
Kulikov,
30 years old. He'll be
30.
31 in October.
Keep, hold, or fold.
Yeah. Uh, I don't hate the player. Um, I understand why the trade was made. I don't mind his price tag. I mean, keep is not really an option in that they don't have a contract on him. I mean, they can hold in terms of making an offer, or they can fold by just say, "Be gone, Dimitri. We saw more than enough from you that to know that we don't have plans for you in the future." I'm kind of in the hold camp on him. I think he's a decent depth player, but maybe you've already got that with Chris Russell. I certainly wouldn't be offering him any kind of big money, but he was funny. Like he posted good results in the regular season, and then he kind of had a tough go of it in the playoffs and wound up in the press box for the final game. I liked a lot of what he brought. Um, Ultimately, Oilers had a weakness all season, I would say, at second left defenseman, and he was arguably the best choice, but none of them were really the solution at two lefty. They missed Oscar Klefbom, and a 5-5. I don't think they ever really replaced him. Tall order, mind you.
Yeah, I don't see Oscar Clefbaum coming back based on
hmm
what I'm hearing. So the Oilers need a second pairing, a two, second pairing defenseman on the left side.
Yeah.
And Philip Broberry, who we've talked about a lot, I think is going to get that role. So what they need is
Eventually.
a short term. They need the Tyson Barrie of left shot D-men, someone
hmm
who's going to come in on a 1 or 2 year contract and crush it. Someone who's going to get the job done in the short term. Barrie didn't. Barrie crushed it on the attack, not defensively. But I think that's what the Oilers need. Is a player like Tyson Barrie as well. When I'm watching a little bit of the playoffs now and then, a smattering of the playoffs. I caught the Colorado Vegas last night.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce, watching the Colorado Avs play hockey is like watching a different sport. It's like fast break, Showtime LA Lakers basketball from the 80s. Their defensemen are so fast. And how they added Devon Taves to that fast list of defensemen. He's fast too, but they have Makar and Girard. And Makar and Girard is like hyper warp speed, like it's just a different class than most NHL defensemen in terms of speed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you have to be as that fast to necessarily win in the playoffs. Vegas isn't that fast. They might well beat Colorado. But Bruce, the Oilers got to get faster on their defense. We were just, okay, here's my breakdown, and we'll see if you agree, although I pre-checked my list with you, so I know that you kind of agree. Of above average NHL skaters, average NHL skaters for defensemen, and below average. So on the above average list, I had 2 NHL defensemen on the Oilers. Darnell Nurse, who has got fantastic straight ahead speed and pretty good agility, but fantastic straight ahead speed. Caleb Jones, who's got fantastic ability and pretty good straight ahead speed, I would say. If we were to include Philip Broberg, he has both. He's got definitely that fast ahead, straight ahead speed. And I think he's also got pretty good agility, which is why the Oilers drafted him so high. Still working on that. So in the average category, I have Chris Russell, who's going to be, was an above average skater earlier in his career, not so much anymore. Average, but still average, maybe a little bit, on the high end of average. Slater Koekkoek, who I thought was an average NHL skater. He's got pretty good agility. Evan Bouchard, and one name on my list that I cannot read all of a sudden. We'll get back to that. Tyson Barrie, average NHL skater. Mm-hmm. He was fairly decent agility, Tyson Barrie, but he's not super fast with the puck. And then below average, we have Adam Larson, Ethan Bear, William Lagesson, and Dmitry Kulikov, who I think is just a little like he's on the higher end of the below average, but he's not. I don't think he's his skating doesn't stand out. That is a slow defense. It's still too slow. And Tippett, Dave Tippett leaned towards the slower guys. I mean, Caleb Jones, as the year went on, didn't get into the playoffs. He had a fast defenseman he could have used to speed things up. He had Evan Bouchard, who is an average skater, but plays fast. Like, his reading of the game is hyper. It's on, it's hyperdrive. He's got dilithium crystals in his brain. He just processes it so fast that he would have put them in a different category of attacking speed as well. It didn't go with him. Tippett went with the Kulikovs, the Larsons, which I fully approve of going with Larson. And some key choices, Bruce, and I think it hurt the Oilers. So with Kulikov, because I think the Oilers need to get a faster player, charting in for 1 year. Bob Stauffer on Oilers Now was mentioning Gustafsson from Montreal as a possibility, which I thought was a very, very interesting possibility for a 1 year deal. I'm going to go with Fold on Dmitry Kulikov. I think they already have Chris Russell as your slow defensive D-man. He's as good in that role as Kulikov's going to be, I believe, as the 7th D-man. I want someone faster and better with the puck. Fold.
Okay. Kulikov was he was the number 4 defenseman basically when he was there.
Yeah.
So you could project him as a third pairing, but there's a lot of third pairing guys potentially there. So I like to say, I'm in the middle of him. I don't think he's the worst player they could bring back, but I don't want them to bring all these guys back. And I agree with you that they could use a little more skating, just raw speed and ability. The Colorado warp speed stuff. I mean, one of the issues they've had there is their warp speed defense sometimes abandons the defensive zone before the puck does.
Happened on the goal last night.
That's led to a couple of problems for them. But they certainly activate into the play. It's fun to watch when they're on the fast break. That's for sure. So, like you say, showtime. And it's McCarr is something else with the puck
isn't
on
he?
his stick. Oh,
Isn't
yeah.
he?
So you can understand why they suddenly decided they could afford to get rid of Tyson Barrie, who was a big scoring D-man for them for a number of years. But after McCarr showed the tip of his iceberg in the 2019 playoffs against Calgary, and Barrie had 1 year left at $5.5 million, and they had this guy just coming up on an ELC, and right away they thought, no, he's our guy. We can trade Barrie, fill another need, which they did in getting Nazem Kadri. They would have filled a need if Kadri could stay in the lineup. And they've got, they've also got Samuel Girard, same kind of caliber player, undersized, smaller than, he's 5'10", I think, and 170 pounds, something like that. So like they didn't have room for three of those guys. So Barrie was the one they moved on from. And of the three, I would say Barrie is the worst skater.
Yeah.
And he's not a bad skater, but those two are both plus in that department. So uh, the comparison to Colorado, Oilers are not going to fare well in that comparison on a number of fronts, and puck-moving defensemen would be on that list.
Definitely the case, and I just think they got to get better. I mean, they are going to get better. Evan Bouchard and Philip Broberg are going to be in their top four. You'd hope maybe Bouchard next year in the top four. Philip Broberg in a year or two. So it's going to change. And it's going to change from internal improvement, but I think they're going to need a stop unless Clefbaum can be that stopgap somehow. They're going to need that guy, and it's not Kulikov. Now, could it be Slater Koekkoek? And I'm going to say keep. For me, Slater Koekkoek is a keep. Bruce, I just was really impressed with him this year. He too bad he got hurt. He was playing well. He came on strong early and played really well. Then he had a little bit of a downward slip. But he can move the puck. He makes good decisions. He was much better defensively than I thought he was going to be. His defensive reading of the game was strong. He made the right reads. He kept his body in the right position between his man and the net, generally speaking. He covered the slot well. I thought he was a good player. Can he play in the top four as a stopgap? Everyone says no automatically. I don't say no automatically. I wouldn't bank on it. Right. I wouldn't book it. But if you, let's say you have Nurse, who's your top guy, definitely your top guy, and then you're going to have two other guys and maybe four other guys, including Chris Russell. So you got Russell, you're going to have, I hope, Caleb Jones, you have Lagesson, maybe Lagesson. You have Koekkoek. I think you're going to probably get rid of maybe one Lagesson or Russell, send one of those guys to the minors or move them out. But I think Koekkoek's in the mix because he could compete. He's definitely can play the bottom pairing and hold his own. And could he step up and play with Adam Larsson on the second pairing? It's a reach, and it's not something you should plan on. And you should be going for a better plan A.
Uh-huh.
But it's a possibility as a plan B. And plan A for Koekkoek would be third pairing. And that works for me because he's going to be cheap and he can get the job done. So I'm a definite keep with him.
Yeah, Koekkoek, he was funny, by eye he looked all right. And the results when he was out there, not so all right. And he was third pairing, like he got third pairing minutes, he got third pairing assignments. He played more against the opposition's grunt players than their elite players. And he got smoked pretty good on shot share. Like Oilers were around 42% of shot attempts, about 44% of shots, and just 25% of goals. They scored 4 goals and allowed 12 when Koekkoek was on the ice, and that's only like just around 200 minutes on the season before he got his clavicle busted and he missed the whole second half of the season. And then in the playoffs, I found that he was fairly a pleasant surprise. Like I thought he and Bear were a good pairing, other than they had a couple of disasters. They had that one in the tying goal in Game 4 where Bear coughed up the puck and Koekkoek tried to make the hero play and went sliding right on by everything, and it all fell apart thereafter. And Dave Tippett responded by nailing both of their butts to the bench for the remaining 60 minutes of the game. And I didn't think Koekkoek had been that bad in the playoffs, and he actually, he performed a little better than I expected, frankly, in the postseason. But overall, I was a little more lukewarm towards him than I thought I might be. Like, I was quite happy when they signed him. And the more I saw of him during the season, the more I was going, well, puck's in the wrong end a lot.
Well, yeah, great shot
wrong
share
net
from
a lot.
Chicago, right? That's why analytics people were excited about the signing.
Yeah.
Bruce, I'm gonna like, I've looked at this a little bit, and I know
Yeah.
that we don't agree on this, and lots of people don't agree with me. I just want to describe why I don't agree with going on shot
Yeah.
shares, especially for defensemen, because I find them to be random. If you take,
Yeah.
I don't believe, if you dig into this for teams, I don't believe shot shares predict future shot shares. His shots for and his shots against. Look at his shots for in the first half of all these defensemen. Do they predict how they're going to do in the second half? There's not much of a correlation there. I think it's kind of a random stat for defensemen, and I don't put a lot of weight into it because it's just riddled with false positives and false negatives on all these players. When we dug down into Koekkoek and we watched the scoring chances that he was on the ice for, he had one of the best grade A scoring chances plus minus of any Oilers defenseman. Now that was against weak competition, so you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But he did fine. He was contributing to a lot of grade A chances, and he was stingy giving them up in his own end. According to when you bear down on those particular plays, is he leaking chances against? No, he wasn't. So, when it's like when we went through Devon Shore recently, everything matched up. He had terrible shot shares, and our numbers also matched up. He just wasn't contributing to a lot of chances, and he wasn't a great defensive player either. He was just average on the Oilers. So when they all align, but here there's a big difference.
Right.
And again, I find these numbers to be, especially for defensemen, I find that the on ice numbers work a little bit better for forwards because the forwards, especially the shots for if forwards really do participate in a high number of shots they're on the ice for, they make a contribution, but it's not the case with D-men. They're shots for when they're on the ice, and even on shots against. So anyway, that's my position on it. But I know
here's a bit of a clue maybe on Slater Koekkoek. I'm looking at him by a teammate. He played 49 minutes with Kyle Turris and 45 minutes with Connor McDavid. Right? Like, he played more with Kyle Turris than he did with McDavid. Now, bear in mind that Turris also played way more in the first half of the season and not so much in the second half. But when he was on the ice with Turris, the shots on net were 14 for Edmonton, 37 for the other guys, and the goal share was 0 for the Oilers and 4 against. And this is in about 48 minutes. So about if it was a full 60-minute hockey game, they would have lost it 5-0. Now, McDavid, on the other hand, when he was out there with McDavid, the shot share was 29 for Oilers, 19 against. But the goal share was still poor at 2-4, so they got outscored in that time, but they actually carried the play pretty good. So, as you say, who the forward that the defenseman's lining up with would have considerable say in it. And I will say this: if they do bring back Slater Koekkoek, I don't want him playing on Kyle Turris's line. But I don't really think we have to worry much about that because I don't think we'll be seeing much of Kyle Turris in 21-22.
Bruce, that whole thing with Kyle Turris just made me question the Oilers' player scouting so profoundly.
Yeah,
it just was such a terrible miss. Yeah. I couldn't say it when they signed him. I hadn't watched the video myself.
Right.
I am not watching him in Nashville, but they bought him out. They had bumped him out of the lineup. I'm guessing it was similar. And to count on him to be the checking center, I want to talk about this at the end, Bruce.
Right.
About the OEL. The Oilers coming close to, or lots of talk in Edmonton at least about the Oilers acquiring OEL. Oliver Ekman-Larsson last summer. I think it was the same thing. Like Tippett, one common mistake is a coach has experience with the player and they trust the player. And
Mhm.
Tippett had coached Turris 5 years ago or whenever in the World
At the World
Championships.
Championships for
And he had
10,
done
10
well as the
games.
defensive center. And so Tippett had, this is part of the narrative when they signed the guy. That's not state of the art pro scouting. That's terrible pro scouting. If that's what you're going on. Now it paid off with Mike Smith. It worked with Mike Smith where Dave Tippett had experience with the guy and they brought him in and he worked out this year. But Kyle Turris was just so not close to being a defensive center, third line defensive center. He torpedoed all of the goals against shot goal shares numbers of every player that he played with because he wasn't covering players in the defensive slot. And it was a goal a game, it seemed like early in the year. So whichever pro scout recommended him, they should go back, look at their notes, see who was strongest in favor of bringing in Kyle Turris, and they should fire that scout because that is such a mistake. That's probably a little harsh, but this is you can't afford to make those kind of mistakes. Here's what they should do, Bruce. They should look at the process that led them to sign Kyle Turris, and they should improve it. They've got to improve whatever they did and not go by those same things because that process clearly had a huge gaping hole in it. It caused a huge and gaping wound in the Oilers this season. All right. Caleb Jones, keep, hold, or fold?
Well, I'm in the keep camp on Caleb Jones for sure. Now, he does have a year left on his $850,000 contract, which is a good value contract, and it should have been better value this year than it was. I thought he had a pretty ho-hum year for the amount of talent that he's gotten for the development he'd shown last year. But it seemed like he was kind of one step forward, two steps back this year, where he'd play and he'd look all right, and then he'd make some big mistake and it'd wind up in the back of their net, and it was often seemed like a key goal against. And he lost the trust of his coach, and it kind of went sideways from there. The wild card here is that he is very possibly prime candidate to be selected in the expansion draft by Seattle if the Oilers don't protect him. And recent intel from the Oilers suggests that they might not protect him, depending on what happens with their defensemen between now and that draft, which is in the latter part of July. So there was a big article in The Athletic yesterday. Daniel Nugent-Bowman was writing about Oilers' plans. And if they sign Adam Larsson, who we spoke about previously, and it sounds like a deal might be done with Larsson in the relatively near future, in which case they would have to protect him. And they'll also be protecting Darnell Nurse, obviously, and also Ethan Bear. And if they protect a fourth defenseman, whether it would be Jones or if they were even throwing out the idea that it might be Lagesson, and then the other complete wild card is Clefbaum. Like if his health changes, then they might want to try and get him under that umbrella somehow. So there's a couple of different paths the Oilers can go. Of course, they can go 7-3-1 or 4-4-1, where they protect forwards, defense, goalie. So if they want to protect Jones, they would probably have to go the 4-4-1 route. And I'm not sure they're as high on him as many of the people that are absolutely insisting that Jones should be protected no matter what. Like there's an awful lot of fans and followers, protected lists out there that have Caleb Jones on the list, like with pen. And I think he's a bubble player for the expansion draft. And he's the sort of player that surely Seattle should be looking for, and they may well take him. But can you say right now today that he's going to be a 6 or 10 year NHL pro and a solid player? Certainly possible. Got to make that call.
Yeah. So he just had the weirdest season I think I've seen from an Oilers defenseman. In that he was really, really great moving the puck. He did a good job moving the puck, as well as anyone. He had a few turnovers, but they all do. The guy can move the puck. but he just leaked grade A chance after grade A chance. His defensive game was atrocious, and he lost the confidence of the coach. Maybe the coach lost confidence in him,
Mm-hmm.
and that made him lose confidence. He seemed to had the look of a player who was nervous, never settled, lacking composure, making mistakes that you wouldn't hadn't seen from him in the past. So he's got to fight through that. Like we've seen this with other players. Jujhar Khaira was coughing up the puck constantly the previous season, and something turned all of a sudden. He just started to make good plays with the puck, especially before he got hurt there. Right. He was taking his time. He was making good plays. He wasn't throwing it away. He had thrown away the puck continually the year before, and so all of a sudden it stopped. And my guess is it's a confidence issue, or it's an issue with the player saying, everything's gone wrong. I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to try to make a play and see what happens. I'm just going to, take that risk, because what's happening now, me second guessing myself and not going for it. It's killing my career. That's what's happening with Caleb Jones. Like he was still going for it with the puck, but there was too many turnovers. His defensive reads were just out of this world bad this season. And he hadn't been that way last year. That last year he had been on defense, Bruce. He'd been okay. He'd been in a large group of Oiler defensemen who were average on defense. This year he wasn't even close to that. So I like the idea, though, and going back to this idea of a faster puck-moving defense. Why would you get rid of one of your fastest and best puck-moving defensemen? Why not work with him on his defense and on his defensive reads and confidence? Stick with this player, because there is real potential there. I still see that in Caleb Jones. And it could easily be realized. He could easily be, 2 years from now, he could be easily playing in Europe, or he could just as easily be a top 4 left shot D-man on a team who's helping his team go deep into the playoffs. I could see either of those things. It's just weird with a player like him. Because the Oilers have such a great need in this particular category of skating on defense and moving the puck on defense, you don't get rid of them, and you do what you can to keep them. Do you keep them over Ethan Bear? Like if you can only protect 3 defensemen, and let's say Nurse is one, obviously.
Right.
The Larson thing, I guess, the question will people say, well, why don't you just wait and sign him afterwards? Have the old nudge, wink, wink going on.
Handshake agreement?
Yeah, that's a good question. Is that out of the question? Can they not do that? So I wouldn't throw that out the window. If that's possible, do that. If everyone's cool with that, if Larson's cool with that, and the Oilers are, if everyone's like on the same page, do that. Protect both Jones and Bear then and Nurse. That would work. Now, if there's, but I don't know, maybe there's some reason you don't do that, or you can't do that, or it's not to everyone's liking to do that. I can't say about that. This is like an unknowable for me. So I'm going to go with I'm not going to criticize them if they sign him, because maybe there's a reason I don't know about this. Can't think of it. Maybe can you think of a reason that they got to do it now?
As opposed to a handshake agreement?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure how the league is enforcing that kind of stuff behind the scenes to try and give Seattle a fair shake coming in for their $650 million that they paid for their team. That they don't want too much gerrymandering going on behind the scenes of players nominally left available for free agency that suddenly sign with their team the day after Seattle has talked to them. If the league has a chance to rule against the Oilers, they will, is my experience. So I'm very reluctant to get out there in the gray areas of the rules for that reason. I think Holland, it's not really his style, but hey, fool me, Ken. I mean, do it and fool me. But I think he likes his bird in hand theory, and if he wants Adam Larson back, he'll just sign him and work with what he got. I mean, he knows he's going to lose one player to Seattle, and it might be Caleb Jones, and if it isn't, he's going to lose another, presumably decent player to Seattle. So my secret dream is that Seattle talks to the free agents and actually signs Tyson Barrie. And if they do that, then the Oilers are off the hook for the expansion draft, and they don't have to worry about their protected list thereafter. So that's my secret dream.
Well, if my secret dream would be if Ken Holland can be sneaky and it's within the rules, like if it's not against the rules. I mean, Tampa Bay might win the cup, Bruce, because they're freaking sneaky and got away with it. So sneaky seems to be in the NHL. I'm not gonna castigate sneaky when it's a huge part of the Stanley Cup run of the Tampa Bay Lightning and sneaky, like be sneaky, Ken Holland, be sneaky, Adam Larson, and it's the difference between keeping Caleb Jones or William Lagesson, I think, because Seattle's likely to take one or the other. Probably a good bet. And I'm in the pretty firm Jones over Lagesson camp at this point. So I would like them to figure out a way to protect Caleb Jones. It would be a good message to the player that they believe in him. And, to a boost to his confidence. Man, I thought he was going to be top pairing with Larson this year, based on his play the previous year, where he really was a pretty solid two-way player, mainly playing third pairing minutes. So it's always difficult to transplant that third pairing, strong third pairing play, like we saw from Koekkoek this year, I'm going to argue, into a second pairing role. I'm cautious about
difference.
Didn't work with Benning. We saw Benning have some decent years in the third pairing. Just a huge difference, and it impacts all of their numbers, like counting numbers, and so. But Jones didn't make the jump this year. Either he can learn from that though. He can learn from that. They can all that potential's still there. That puck moving's there. So I hope they figure out a way to get that done. I heard an interesting Bruce idea from at Speeds on Twitter. I'm not sure what his name is. Do you know what his name is?
Michael Spadell.
Okay. He had a great suggestion. If the Oilers go with 7-3, and he's often pushing the old RFA sheets. That's every year you can count on him.
He'd be a very edgy GM. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But he has interesting ideas that are worth thinking about. And once in a while, it'd be nice to see someone actually try one of them, see if they could.
So this was the idea: is that the Oilers don't have a ton of forwards. If you're going to protect 7 forwards, the guys you're protecting, many of them, and especially if RNH isn't one of them, you have 2 or 3 slots. You have a couple slots where you're protecting guys. Like, why are you protecting them? Like, if you were to lose, let's say it's Zach Kassian, for instance.
Let's say it's Zach Kassian, for instance.
And or it was it could be Jujhar Khaira,
right.
or Tyler Benson could be in one of the other slots. Could be Josh Archibald. Now, right. I think they should protect Josh Archibald based on it. And I'm comfortable with it. But his suggestion is there's all these other teams that have forwards they can't protect. Why not trade right now at a bargain? They're going to lose them anyway, one of them or both of them.
Right.
Trade for one of those guys and use that protected spot on them. Great moment in time to get a player for less than his real value, and then protect him. Use that in your protection spot. It's such a I didn't see one hole in that argument. It seemed like the best suggestion I've heard in a long time. Hope they take advantage of it.
So trade Caleb Jones and bring in a young forward in his place.
Voila.
For instance.
Voila. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. It could be something like that. That could be that's along the lines of the deal where you're going to lose Jones. Well, just make them force Lagesson on him and bring in that Caleb Jones of forwards. So, that.
Yeah, although that doesn't address the speed on defense issue in a good way, but rather than losing Jones in expansion, you could maybe get a more solid forward up front and lose a slightly lesser player. They're going to lose a player no matter what.
Yeah.
So
were you in
the margins?
Where are you with? Did you give keep, hold, or fold on Jones?
Keep.
Keep.
All things considered, keep him. I mean, if you can squeeze him onto the protected list, do it. But he may be, they're going to have to offer a smorgasbord of players to Seattle, but they're only going to take one. So they might take him, they might take someone else. They certainly should be interested in a player like Caleb Jones, who's 23 years old and has got now a fair smattering of NHL experience and is a little bit of a known commodity and still, very young with the future in front of him with a very decent contract. Like, there's lots to like there.
Yeah. I'm in the keep camp. I hadn't really thought of maybe it's hold if they could make a trade, an expansion draft trade for a forward of equal ability. That's a thought. There really aren't. Like, they got to protect McDavid and Draisaitl, Puljujarvi, Yamamoto, Archibald. So that's 5. Archibald's kind of on the gray list.
They could go 4 and 4. I mean, if they're not protecting Nuge, they could go McDavid, Draisaitl, Yamamoto, Puljujarvi, and that's the 4. And then say, okay, have at the rest of them. And if you take one of Archibald, Cassian, Kara, we got other forwards, or we can sign some other forward to fill that hole. But we really have long-term plans for these guys on defense, so we want to go 4 and 4. But the talk is the Oilers are now thinking of going 7 and 3.
Yeah, I wonder what they'll do with RNH. We've talked about this before. It's starting to look like, when I hear on Oilers Now, Stauffer mentions 6 years by $6 million, Bruce, and I wouldn't do that. I think that's a mistake personally. I would rather that Nuge go to market and see what he can get in another city, and then come back to him. I'll be shocked. Maybe I'm wrong, Bruce. I'll be shocked if a team gives him 6 by 6. Do you think a team is going to give Nugent Hopkins $6 million for 6 years? Who? Maybe
Seattle.
Seattle, Columbus. There's a possibility. Yeah, maybe
Seattle talks to him during that window and they sign him, and then the Oilers don't have to let anybody else go. Similar to the scenario I suggested for Tyson Barrie. If they sign one of those unrestricted guys, then that's it for the expansion draft. They get the guy they get from Edmonton is the guy they sign. So,
would you go 6 by 6 on Nugent Hopkins, Bruce? If that could get him signed?
I'm not a big fan of the term. I'd way rather 3 times 6 or 4.
Yeah.
If you're going to go to 6 and
6 is a lot of money.
Sure. Yeah, 6 is plenty.
Today's NHL. 4 by 6. That's the outer limit.
That's a big contract. Yeah.
That's a big contract. 4 by 6. I mean, he was he had 4th line even strength scoring. And it's not he had a tough year. He had a really tough year. His even strength scoring when he was with the Dynamite line was fantastic, but historically hasn't been fantastic. So, I'm okay bringing him back at 6 if it's for the right term, but 6 years, no, I think that's too long. I think that's a mistake. So, all right, last on our agenda, Bruce, let's just talk briefly about, because I'm going to be writing about this soon, about, remember last summer, all the talk about Oliver Ekman-Larsson coming to the Edmonton Oilers in a trade.
Oh, yeah.
And I think in the end, OEL said no, the Oilers weren't on his final list of...
it was Boston and Vancouver. One other team, wasn't it?
Yeah. Wasn't it Vancouver?
And he gave him a hard deadline of the first day of free agency, and when it didn't happen, he just said, all right, my no trade contract, I'm just going to insist on my no move clause. So that's that. So it was, I think it was Vancouver. It was Boston and Vancouver.
When those rumors were raging, it's funny because they had Nurse and Klefbom at that point. The news about Oscar Klefbom hadn't come out yet, but we can see now maybe was a bit more impetus for that news because the Oilers would have known. Let's say we don't know. I can't remember if we ever knew there was any interest from the Oilers, like real, how much the smoke was fire. But we could see why the Oilers might be thinking of it with what was going on with Klefbom. But I recall at the time, Bruce, being against that move, and you being against that move, and other people being more enthusiastic about it. And we were mainly against it because of his 8-year, $8.25 million contract. He was in the first year of that deal this year. I think he's 29 or 30. He signed till, you were looking it up. What's he signed?
2027. It's got 6 more years. It was an 8-year, $66 million deal. He is 29. He'll be 30 next month. And he's got 6 years to run on his deal. And in 2021, he missed 10 games, so he played 46, 3 goals, 21 assists, 24 points, minus 17, and on a team that missed the playoffs. And he was no longer even their number one defenseman, judging by ice time. He ranked third on the team behind Jacob Chikrin and Alex Goligoski, both of whom are over 23 minutes. And Ekman Larsson was down to 20 minutes and just under 21 minutes a game, low for him. And what I don't know is a lot about him. And what I don't know is whether the injury was such that he was playing at less than 100% for a chunk of time, either before or after he was out of the lineup, which sometimes the injury has a lingering effect that can slow a guy down for a bunch of a season or even the rest of the season sometimes. So there may be some of that, but it was, I'm not sure that he came close to earning his $8.25 million this year, and he isn't getting any younger.
So, Bruce, when it came to even strength ice time for all NHL defensemen, he ranked 96th. Mm-hmm. He was probably, in the top 5 for pay? He ranked 96th for even strength ice time, and he ranked 123 for even strength point scoring. So he was a second pairing defenseman. He did well on the power play this year. Mm-hmm. He was a top performer on the power play, one of them in the NHL. But his even strength play was second pairing level. It's a lot of money, and this is what concerns me. Like last year, there was already this dip in his play. You'd already seen in the numbers a dip in Ekman Larsson's play. He was no longer in the top 10, for points, time on ice, all of these different ways you can rate defensemen. And it was already evident last year. He ranked around 50th or something like that in the NHL, as I recall. And so you're already seeing a slide. And it's like Nugent Hopkins this year. Okay, you're already seeing a slide in a 28, 29-year-old player, and you're looking at signing him long term. I just think that is, you have to think hard about that. There has to be like a overwhelmingly good reason to proceed with a long-term contract. If there isn't, why are you doing it? Because cap space goes a long way in today's NHL, and you can get like good players, especially when you have McDavid and Draisaitl. We saw this year Tyson Barrie was willing to come here. There will be other players who will come here. Dominic Cahoon came here. He probably had other opportunities, a few others. He came here on a really low contract. So I just bring him up because it's important for all of us to remind ourselves of the times we were wrong. Now, we happened to be, you and I, right on Ekman Larsson, I think. At least in the short term, we were right. He didn't have a year that matched his contract. I've been wrong in the past on other players. I thought, again, Caleb Jones, I thought he was going to step up into the top 4. I was incorrect on that. So it's something for me to think about. Why was I wrong? So now I think my lesson is anytime I'm projecting someone who's done well in the third pairing into a top pairing, like Slater Kuekkoek this year, he did well by my way of ranking players in a third pairing role, but I'm going to be cautious and not have him as option A there. I don't think that's a good idea based on what I learned from Jones this past year. So, if you're pushing Ekman Larsson right now, and then you're also really keen on Nugent Hopkins, maybe you should think about that, is my point. Like, we all need to think about where we got it wrong. And the difficulty is that every player is an individual and they defy the patterns. So it's hard to apply the pattern. You can get it wrong applying the pattern. But look for the pattern. See how durable and strong they are. Look at your predictions, who you picked to do well in the past. See if they're actually doing well. It's just a way for you to maybe, if nothing else, have a little bit more humility in terms of being certain that you're right on. The Oilers got to do it with this player. They must do it, and if they don't do it, Ken Holland's the biggest dummy who's ever lived. Like, you might back off on that if you go back and look at your tweets from a year ago and see who you favored for all these different positions. So that's
Ekman Larsson. This was his 10th year in the NHL. As a rookie, he played 22 minutes a game. Then he had 3 years over 25, 2 years over 24, 3 years over 23, and then this year he dropped all the way down to 20.58 per game. So by far the least ice time that he's got 6 years to run on that contract. So if that's the beginning of a trend, look out. And like I say, I don't know enough that maybe it was special circumstances, and the young fellow Chychrun was playing well enough that they were spotting Ekman Larsson to a lesser role because he was nursing something. But I would say that I'm not unhappy that the Oilers didn't take on the final 7 years of that pact.
Yeah, Chychrun and Goligoski were their top pairing. They were getting about 19, 20 minutes at even strength a game.
Yep.
And Ekman Larsson again was like about 17 minutes at even strength. So he was a solid second pairing defenseman in the NHL this year. Strong power player, but his salary should have been around $5 million a year, and based on his level of play. So, yeah, man, bullet dodged, bullet dodged, Bruce. I'm saying maybe he's going to come on and prove me wrong. Maybe Ekman Larsson, there's definitely that possibility that this year he's going to step up again. And so Goligoski, is he the right or the lefty there?
He's the right.
He's the righty, eh? So Chychrun, OEL's not going to. Chychrun's on the way up. He's heading into the prime years of his career. Yep. Hard to believe that OEL is going to take over from that guy. So, and now they can't, there's no way they can move him. Last summer, it looked like a deal. Even then, they couldn't move him, right? Because he was hesitant to move, but other teams weren't willing to pay the price then. So, but
I mean, we're talking about the contract. What would be the acquisition cost? What was being tossed around at the time in terms of what it was going to cost the Oilers to get the guy? I can't remember. It's not emblazoned in my mind like the PK Subban trade where the cost was Draisaitl and either Nurse or Klefbom and a fourth overall pick for a ninth and Subban. I mean, that would have been devastating. And I'm drawing a blank on what this. I'm not sure it was ever sort of nailed down in any kind of way that it was a firm offer or anything close, but it would not have been free. And I think there was some recognition that it was a cap dump for Arizona, so that should reduce the acquisition costs, but still would have cost a bunch of assets.
Let me just see, Bruce, if I can find what was being talked about really quickly here in terms of former GMs Brian Lawton and Brian Burke said that Oliver Ekman Larsson is still in the top 15 D-men in the league, while ex-player Louis DeBrusk wasn't so sure, saying that OEL wasn't a true number one D-man because he did not dominate both ways any longer with his defensive play not at the highest level. Louis, props to Louis DeBrusk. He got that right. And Brian Lawton and Brian Burke got it wrong, I'm going to suggest. Let me see what we're talking about. I was just trying to place him, and I didn't have him I didn't have him in the top 15 either. But I remember the price being pretty steep. I'm going to do a post on this, so I'll dig a little bit more deeper and find out what that price was. But it was, we're talking about a player and a top pick, I think was the idea, wasn't it? As I recall.
Yeah. If
I recall correctly. So.
Something along those lines.
Yeah. Didn't happen. Good. Alrighty. Should we leave it there?
Yeah, well, he was certainly well above the top 15 in salary.
Yeah.
For a defenseman, so just in terms of cap hit for what they would have been getting. And I mean, that's the trouble when you look at this thing at the high paid defenseman. You've got Erik Karlsson, number one. And there's a guy who's getting paid for past performance and not for what he's doing now, but for what he's done in the past. And guy, with injury woes and, I mean, it's the years take a toll on these guys. And when you talk about 6, 7, 8 year into the future contracts for guys entering their 30s, that to me is almost a no-go zone anymore. It just doesn't pay off frequently enough to be worth going deep.
Well, based on his last 2 years of play, Bruce, if the Oilers had made that move, it would have been a franchise killing move, possibly for the Oilers. Like it could be in that category because even if he stayed the same, it's a massive overpay, and then you can expect decline as he gets into like 30, 34, like 34, 35 for sure. So, wow, you
He
just
was
have to be
number
so careful about term in the NHL, and this is with Nugent Hopkins. You might have to just you might just have to walk. And
Mhm,
some Oilers fans are going to lose their minds. Like, and I
mhm,
get it. I
oh,
really want him to be on the Edmonton Oilers. I
mhm.
love the player as an Edmonton Oiler. He's been a great Edmonton Oiler. But if he wants that kind of money over 6 years, it's just you just have to test the market, Ryan, and come back to us because it doesn't make sense. So
Yeah, he was number 6. Eric Carlson, Drew Doughty, both at 11 million change. Roman Yossi, PK Subban, Alex Petrangelo, then Oliver Ekman-Larsson. And then 4 guys tied at 8 million just behind him: Brent Burns, Jacob Trouba, John Carlson, Thomas Chabot. And only then do you get down to one of the actual Norris Trophy candidates, Victor Hedman, at number 11. Now you're talking about, a real value contract. And it's, to pay over 10% of your salary cap to one player, that guy's got to be a serious outperformer.
yeah, yeah, indeed. Maybe the Vancouver Canucks are they had a weakness on defense. Maybe he would have made sense there. I don't know. Maybe he'd still be the number one guy if he was in Vancouver. Was Hughes is on the left side, or is he on the right side?
Left.
He's a left, Quinn
He's
Hughes.
a lefty. Yeah.
All right. So there doesn't make sense there either. Like if you had a need for a number one left shot D man, then maybe you might have gone for it then. Now, well, good luck.
If the Islanders take out Boston tonight, maybe the Bruins will be back in the market for the guy.
Good. All right. Let's leave it there, Bruce.
All right. Sounds good.
Thanks for talking.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.